Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Superman Lois, Season 2, Episode 3. So, right off the bat, it feels like there was a certain kind of a way that Batwoman would approach their shows. And it kind of feels like there's a hint of that weirdly in this episode. You know what? When it feels like there is a certain way for them to approach a certain character, and then all of a sudden you go on and see what kind of thing they're doing towards the end of this episode, giving us a stereotypical thing for a certain kind of person to do. Like, is the other disposition, or is the other candidate going to go on and showcase how, like, hey guys, I'm going to be going on and cleaning my guns and talking to you about, like, how I can save Smallville as I clean my guns, and I go on and I taxidermy this squirrel. Because, yeah, we have, like, stereotypical stuff that is to meet a stereotypical thing that only they can come up with. Oh, yeah, like, Lana is to only be good at what she's doing because she's some kind of opposite of the mayor that already exists. I wonder what that opposite thing could be. Oh! How creative is this show? How creative is this show? How really just predictable the show is for 90% of the time. Where I would go on and I would say, you know what, the last episode, this show is doomed. And maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe I was wrong about this show being doomed. Because I feel like this show is actually bizarre. Very, very bizarre. Because, you know what? If you take an idea from the first season, and it's like, wow, that idea was just so... it was so beautiful, it was so tastefully done. How can we go on and repeat that exact same thing in another season? I wonder how we can go on and take one thing that happened so often in Season 1 and just to plop it down in Season 2 in a different way. I don't know. Seems difficult. Seems bizarre. You know what? When it comes down to a villain, I would have hoped, honestly, they would have gone on and used this kind of character for Titans. Not in the approach of which that is in a conventional sense. To really just have, like, the easiest approach to that character. No. You can do some things with Superboy and have that character be technically a reinvented thing. Like, that is exclusively for that show. And that, honestly, would be cool. I would have liked that. Or really, there is a ton of interesting things that, honestly, they can go on and do with Kryptonite that I don't think that they have ever done. Because I would love it if we had it where all of a sudden there's one kind of Kryptonite that just turns people into a zombie-like state. We could have Superman be fighting zombies. Wouldn't that be cool? What do we need a Doomsday for? We could go on and have, like, doomed people, a doomed group, a doomed, disciples. Doomed disciples. Yeah, that would work. That would sound really sweet. By the way, where is the DOD in this episode? So, in other episodes, these cats just come on and fly in. But in this episode, we just leave it to just kind of Soups and Henry here. I'm sorry, with Anderson, wouldn't every single time he is to hear word about Superman doing anything, shouldn't he just bring his guys in? Because obviously Superman is just unreliable? That's just me. Maybe we just have it to where the DOD just isn't fast action quick enough, but I don't know. It seems like they're pretty quick when it comes down to tag. So we go on in this episode, and so we have it to where Sarah is in the wrong between the relationship of her and Jordan, but weirdly we have to desperately have it to where Jordan is to have to win over Sarah, and I am freaking confused here. Why does Jordan need to win over Sarah? Why is it that technically tying in the secrets of people all of a sudden going to forcibly have us like, oh, well, since you technically have a bigger secret than she does, oh, well, I guess you should go on and you should try to win her back. You should try to win her back. No. So, what's going on with Jordan is heavily predictable, to the point of, like, basically the thing that I was immediately thinking the last episode, ka-ching, it goes on and is a thing in our lives. So that's great. Just a predictable character. So, Lois just needs something to do in this show, and we bring back Sam Lane, to go on and still be heavily predictable upon the show. And so we go on here, and we of course have. I'm gonna have to pause here for 1 second. Okay, I had to try and confirm who the heck that even character was. That was tied with Lois's story. IMDb didn't have it. I'm assuming that this is Alice Sun, whoever it is that they're saying in this episode. And people could correct me if that is an ill-conceived assumption. Because evidently it's not. It seems like they go on and they're having this character that I think there's probably a legitimate reason why we're kind of delaying the showcasing of a certain character to obviously just have this big reveal. Oh, this character is involved. Oh, okay, great. Like as well as we just delay to have just kind of everything in this episode where it's like, hey man, how can we slowly but surely not have Superman do much of anything in these episodes until we really just desperately need him to just do some kind of fighting or some kind of something, because like, hey guys, this is our main star and we don't want him hurt, so we might as well just have him have this roid rage problem, or in this kind of thing, Kryptonian rage. So let's go on to just spoil this episode. I've already kind of teed it up and whatever, so let's go out of our way to say that this episode is a kind of episode, because let's go on to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. This is starting out my day, and already I'm just like, meh. I'm just like meh at the start of my day. So that's great. That's a great way to just start out. So let's just go on and cover a bunch of stuff so we can get it out of the way. And it won't be in the same order of this episode. So ideally, if you want the same order of the episode, go ahead and watch somebody else who reviews this, or go out of your way to go on and watch the show. It's currently on the CW. That's where I got to watch this episode, because I for the life of me even forgot to go on and review this episode, even though it was convenient for me to probably do so. like, I don't know, I'm just not jazzed about the season. It's not one of those where I want to quickly review it, just because it's just, it's just not as interesting or as exciting, or we just get a drop of Batwoman in this episode. So, Lana, let's cover the Lana stuff. So, we go on and we have Lana with Kyle, and so Kyle is only saying that Lana is only good at becoming a candidate to run against this mayor, because she basically is to be a new change of pace because she's a woman. Wow, that's great. And they say that more than once in this episode. I'm like, is that really all that matters? Is that she is to be the opposite gender? Even though Lana is to brush it off as like, well, isn't that a little cliche? Like, but obviously this show has said it more than once. So this show, for going on and saying this more than once, that the only reason why she's good at being a mayor is because of her gender, because it doesn't matter. She's a person, that guy's a person, and then we go on and have her cooking and cutting carrots and just coming up with some video where she's going on and saying like, hey, yeah, I want to try to approach this in a very vastly different way by going on and putting this TikTok video and saying like, hey, let's all sit down and let's discuss our issue through a social media. And maybe I can answer some things via social media so I can help you guys out and answer them at my own time. So we go on, we have her cooking, because obviously if she is to not really fit the bill on the whole, like, female thing, we're doing that by having her cooking, I guess. Like, here's the thing. You know what they should have had her done? They should have shown a side of her that isn't feminine to make her just say, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm not all just woman here. Like, I can go on and do this too. I can be involved in this and that. And plus, we go on and do, like, the Batgirl kind of approach of Lana, so that way it can make her be a much more interesting candidate. Because if I guess she goes on and does a public speaking thing where she's trying to convince people, all of a sudden there's to be one guy that shows up and is just to easily shut her down, going on and saying like, hey, weren't you a Kryptonian once? Didn't you go on and try to do this one thing with all these loans before, and some people lost their farms and their land because of this? So, are we just going to have really just Lana on this social media thing just get the positive people instead of getting the naysayers and whatever, so that way Lana will take her sweet time to either counteract these statements or, like, so I'm like, man, it's kind of a lazy way out. Because I get Lana was to say that she was afraid of public speaking, but, like, this just feels like she's not debating anybody. She's not having to, like, confront anybody because she realizes that she'll get shut down. And a lot of people bring up the problems that had happened in this town that Lana was to be tied with, because she, of course, was working with Morgan Edge, sending down people to eventually become these Kryptonian vessels. And how is it that everybody's still on that, and they go on and they hated this family, but all of a sudden they turn around and realize, you know what, like, you're a Smallville person like I'm a Smallville person, so how about we just kind of forget about that whole, like, you going and turning a town into villainish freaks. Like, we'll just push that under the rug. So, plus, I think this guy was really here to be a plant, so that way we can have this guy, like, possibly pocketing money from this other mayor, because I'm sure that's coming, right? So, now that I feel like I've kind of covered all of that crap with Lana, because I don't enjoy that part of this episode, because of that whole, when they just kept, like, putting in that whole woman thing, I'm like, no, I thought Lana would be a perfect candidate for this whole thing. And it had nothing to do with her gender. It really just had to do with, like, it seems that everybody in the town really likes her, and that's all that really mattered to me. Was it seems like she's a very people person, and it feels like if anybody can go up against this mayor, it obviously has to be Lana. Like, uh, Lana reminds me a lot of like Jonathan Kent, not making that huge comparison of a political person, but still, like, it feels like she's very liked by everybody, and it also feels like there are some, like, she's really trying to put uh, a lot of people forward. She's putting people forward before herself, and that's what I think that Lana should have showcased here. Is that she's going to, like, she's here to help people. She's not here to just go on and kind of hide away until it seems that something is really going wrong in this town, and then all of a sudden the mayor shows his face. And I think that's what kind of happens with a lot of the first season Superman stuff, where you rarely ever see the mayor do a lick of anything, but then all of a sudden, like, how many times do you really see the mayor in this show? How often does he come up? But anyways, so pushing on. So we have Jonathan, who is dealing with Timmy in this episode, the ex-kryptonite freak. How did I know that this guy was going to get some ex-kryptonite inside of his life? Because of course I did. Because heaven forbid this show get very creative. Good God, Timmy. So of course this guy is kryptoniting it up. Because of course we go on and we have Jonathan who's talking to Candace. And Candace is saying, like, well, yeah, like, it's obvious that that Timmy is going on and doing some kind of roids or some kind of something. And because John is thinking that too, he's like, yeah, there's something about this guy that doesn't seem natural. And so Candace is like, well, like, he's not going on taking some roids, he's taking some crystal crap. And so we immediately have it where Jonathan's like, oh my God, he's taking XK. So we go on because, like, Jonathan is going and telling Jordan, hey man, look at all this, like, look at all these things that are going so well for Timmy, and now I want to go on and try to figure out a way to derail all that because I want a spot in the football team because I don't want to ride a bench for another season. So what are they going to test for ex-kryptonite now? To just say, like, well, obviously this guy's juicing. I don't even think in high school, like, do they really test for that kind of stuff? Do they even really care? It's just like, hey man, like, if we win state, I don't give a like. So we go on, we have Jonathan who is to confront Timmy about this whole thing. And really just Timmy is to watch this all down is like, hey, what are you, just jealous that I just found a way to just beat you, Jonathan? And so, speaking of beating, we of course have Jonathan that starts to beat up Timmy to the point of now all of a sudden Clark gets into the way of Jonathan's fists and gets knocked out or gets kind of taken down to where he has to fake that he had gotten hurt because this is Superman here. So all of a sudden we still have it where Superman's powers are backfiring and are like, yeah, we kind of have Clark here kind of dealing with his powers like we deal with Jordan and his powers in the last season. I'm like, man, this story, every time I every time I pull at strings, I'm just finding just like, man, how creative is this show? Ugh. Somebody has to have power side effects in the show. Ugh. So we go on and we have another episode filled of heat vision. And so we go on and we have Superman or Clark who's confronting Jonathan about him fighting. And of course we have Clark who gets so upset that he goes and bashes his helmet into a vending machine and then heat visions his hands and then has burned his hands. He's like, oh my god, my hands! So he ends up having to forcibly have both Kent and Jonathan go home. So, to think about what Jonathan did. So, in the beginning of this episode, we of course have it where, since Jonathan is dealing with his Timmy steroid thing, we go on and we also have it where Jordan is dealing with Sarah and his decision about what they are to do. But let's wrap up that whole Jonathan-Timmy situation because I kind of left something unsaid there. Timmy is going on and mentioning to Jonathan, hey, yeah, like, I think that your girlfriend was to give me the XK, so... So, in other words, it always comes down to drugs. Like, somebody's dealing XK under the table. And coincidentally, how is it that Jonathan doesn't know, or didn't know, that Candace is to be dealing this out? Baffles and confuses me. Because I'm like, okay, you would think that, like, Jonathan would know what's going on. But I guess he's just this naive guy that just can't wait to get this girl's clothes off, because that's all that matters, right? So... Jonathan goes on and is to confront Candace later on in this episode and immediately tells her, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm not going to break up with you. Like, I'm okay that you're selling this X-Kryptonite, but hey, go and give me some. And I'm like, oh my god, this is so predictable. Immediately when I saw this thing happening, I was like, there's obviously one way to write this show. And instead of Jonathan trying to do the right thing, he's going to go on and try to do the one thing that in the last season, he was like, oh my god, like, Jordan has powers, Clark has powers, who, what about me? So, like, that obviously is just, like, so we're just going to now have Jonathan, who every once in a while is going to have to secretly power up, so that way he can save his family or something like that. And then they'll realize that he's a kryptonite addict. And so we'll have to have him deal with that. He'll be forced into rehab or whatever. He'll go into Kryptonite Anonymous or something. He'll go to KA. Whatever. So, or maybe we'll have it where all of a sudden we're having Clark and Lois think that all of a sudden, hey, Jonathan must, like, be a late bloomer. He has superpowers. And then all of a sudden, Jonathan will be forced to now have to take the X-Kryptonite and just say that he has power when he really doesn't. He's just a druggie. Good for him. Good for him being a druggie. Like, wow, what a good thing. What a good moral story to tell your youngins in the show. Drugs are okay, kids. No, they're not. They're not okay. But evidently Jonathan likes to just dabble in a little bit of XK, if you know what I mean, every once in a while. Just slap on some kryptonite, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, what a good message you're sending your youth of America. Dare you. Whatever. Anyways, so let's back a little bit. So Clark is going on and is to have Jordan tell Jonathan, and here's where I relate the Clark thing, because we're going to get there. So Jordan tells Jonathan that, like, maybe it's time for Jordan to tell Sarah his secret. Because Jonathan is telling Jordan, it's like, well, hey, like, you have a secret too. Like, so Sarah went on and kissed a girl, and she liked it. And so now she just isn't going to, I guess, come out and be either bisexual or whatever for the show. So we're going on and having Jordan relating Sarah kissing a girl to now Jordan having his secret powers. So they have to force Jordan to now go on and tell his father how this relates to Clark. Dad, I need to go and tell Sarah my secret because I think I want to win her over. And I think the only way I can do that is tell her I have superpowers. And Clark is like, no, that's a mistake. No. Really, when thinking about it, this all comes down to Clark going and telling Lana his secret. Where when Clark is to go and finally tell Lana in the Smallville show, like, hey, yeah, like, I'm Superman, and let's get married. All of a sudden, we have Lana in that episode getting killed off by Lex knowing, and Lex and Lana, like, car chasing, and all of a sudden getting into an accident where Clark is to realize that Lana is dead. Having to go back in time to save Lana is to cost Clark someone else in his life that he, of course, still loves. Spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen Smallville, because I'm not going to ruin where that ends, but if you know the show, you know exactly what goes on in that show. So, I'm feeling that if Jordan is to finally tell Sarah the secret of that him being a super kid? Copyrighted, super kid. Because he can't be Superboy, because Connor is that. Unless they're going and doing a brand new Superboy of this. I don't know. So, because Jordan still has powers, it seems like his powers are still working pretty decently. When was that ever going to fade away? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. So, because didn't his father say, like, yes, his powers will vanish forever, so you're only going to get him to have powers for a temporary time? I guess not, right? Like, whatever the show needs, just give Jordan some powers, and he'll his powers will work really well, because we need somebody to step up here. So we go on, and we have Jordan, who's saying to Dad that he's going to reveal his secret to Sarah, and Clark is like, no. Like, she could die, like, being the damsel in distress, and someone's going to target her because she knows that they'll know that she'll know your secret. And so we go on and we have these guys talking in circles, but Clark just gets more and more mad to where his eyes almost are to show bright red, and he's getting in rage mode, and he's almost going to heat vision his eyes, just like how Jordan, when he was to go on and had that whole hearing problem from the last season, where he's to go on and heat vision Superman's hands, and so on and so forth. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So we go on, we have Clark, who now cannot go to school because he might heat vision somebody. Because we just have Clark continuing to get these visions. And so we had to have one point where Superman was to go on to try to make it to the shooter mines, the Schuster mines, and he goes on and he just can't get into those mines because every single time, like, his brain is just going and rattling off louder and louder and louder, to where he just can't make it into the mines. Every time he does, he goes on and just falls and collapses and whatever. So we, of course, now have to have John Henry come in and have him, like, not come in as Steel. He's just coming in there as, like, okay, I'll just be myself, and hopefully nobody comes from behind and clocks me upside the head while I'm going through these mines while I'm talking to this one doctor, which I don't remember her name. So, because I didn't IMDb this one up this time around, and I also tried to research some name, and anyways. So, I said the name last week, so anyways. So, we go on and we have John go into these mines for him to eventually get knocked out, and then we go on and have it where Bizarro Superman is to finally make an entrance from out of this mine, and and I'm kind of getting really ahead of myself here because I don't want to cover much of the Lois stuff. I just don't. So I don't really want to cover that at all. But because we had Lois who's calling Sam and asking if Sam still has some DoD connections, so John Henry Irons can go on and help get into those mines under the radar of Anderson, because both Clark and Anderson aren't on the best of speaking terms. So this, of course, forces Sam to get out of retirement to go back to Smallville, for him to not only go on and stop fishing and seeing a bunch of cranes and him being up at 0600 and all that jazz and fishing and bass and whatever. So we go on and we have, of course, Sam that is going and speaking with Lois all about this cult thing and all about Lucy. And so I guess Sam was to talk Lucy into coming to see Lois, but we don't actually see her in this episode. Instead, we end up seeing this cult leader that is going on and doing all these videos online, talking to people and manipulating them into whatever cult that she's involved in. So, man, is that great. So, it's splendiferous. So we go on and we have this cult leader that meets with Lois instead of Lucy herself. And so I'm like, well, how is this going to turn sour? So, really, that covers all of that. I'm not going to bother to go any further into that. So, let's go on and let's have Bizarro Superman just come out of this cave, or this mine, and start creating some ruckus. We go on and we have it, of course, where we have this guy in this big, massive suit. Why couldn't we have just shown that in the last episode? Because it honestly doesn't feel like the thing from the last episode is to be the exact same thing from what we just see here. It feels like from one week to the other, like I guess they had no clue of what this thing was going to look like. And it just feels obvious from this episode. Hence why this thing was in the pitch black darkness. Whereas in now, all of a sudden it's like this big, massive, muscular thing. It looked like in the other episode we had that, like, a very long-haired character, or like we could see, like, yeah, it's just like, wow, like how they can't be consistent from episode to episode, because heaven forbid you do that right. So all of a sudden we had this like Juggernaut-like character from X-Men, because that's a Marvel thing, who is going on and taking down Superman, beating him up, because really we can't have Superman go and beat this guy because brain problems. So we go on and we have John Henry Irons going and playing off Iron Man 3 here, and we of course now have John Henry who's like, I need my suit, and so his suit comes on him and is to basically all Iron Man 3 up and collect upon his body. And then we go on and we have John Henry who's blasting these things upon this Bizarro Superman, which I guess is technically to weaken him. And so, but we also have it where Bizarro is to go on and do some pretty good damage on John Henry Irons' suit, to where Natalie has to go and talk to John Henry later on, like, oh my god, like, look at your suit, like, you do realize that you can't be like Superman, right? That your suit can get damaged and you could probably die. Of course! Of course? No, really? I didn't think a metal suit could ever get damaged. I didn't think that whatsoever. I immediately think in my mind, I was like, there is no way John Henry Irons' suit could ever get damaged, and that possibly could lead to John Henry dying or getting injured and having him being written off this show at some point. Because if that's the way that they approach this show, I would just go on and realize that maybe at some point Bizarro is just going to go on to be shoved into that other Earth, where we're going to go on and have evil Superman fight Bizarro Superman. Because that's what I'm just expecting to happen at this point, is to just have two Supermen just fight it out. And that's what I'm kind of expecting. Or maybe they're going to bring in evil Superman to go on and fight Bizarro Superman. Maybe that's what. Maybe this is where this show is going to break down to be at some point. So they can just be very uncreative. And I can predict what this show does. So we, fortunate enough, have, of course, Bizarro's half face showing to us, and it seems like this character is to have this kind of like these scribbles upon his face, like as if he's to have all these like these symbols upon his face. And so we go on and we eventually have Superman try to take Bizarro down, but instead Bizarro just flies away, going to, I guess, the Fortress of Solitude, where he is to take off his helmet, take off all his clothes to showcase to us that this, of course, is to be some bizarre Superman. Where, of course, we have the Superman symbol that is different because this is a Bizarro Superman. So really, that's just how the episode ends. We, of course, have at one point where I think some last bit of stuff. Man, 36 minutes. And I think this is like a 50 some odd episode. 50 some odd minute episode. We go on and we have Natalie and Jonathan at one point going on and playing Madden, because we, of course, have Natalie going and saying to Jonathan, like, "Oh, you don't think I can beat you at Madden because I'm a girl?" Why do we have to keep doing these things? Plus, also, I'm still naturally assuming that Jonathan and Natalie are possibly weirdly, like, gonna have this weird relationship that doesn't make sense, because technically Lois Lane is still both of their parents. Technically, either in one world or another, and it's kind of weird to think about that. I was immediately thinking that all of a sudden Natalie was going to end up with Sarah, and that's how that whole thing is just going to work out, to have just Natalie and Sarah just like be too good for one another. So, because we have to have a stereotypical thing in the show, but I guess we're not trying to go in that stereotypical route, because Jordan is to go on and talk to Clark, and so Clark is going on and talking to Jordan. It's like, you know what? I can understand, like, where you're coming from, because technically I was there, Jordan. Like, really, like, I think Clark did want to tell Lana his secret, but he would realize that she would die in some car accident, so, like, he just decided not to. And it would have also led to someone else's death, because when there's death, there is always death. So we go on and we have Clark, who is to tell Jordan, it's like, well, hey, here's the thing. You know what? If you are to be with Sarah for a year and everything works out, there isn't there the will they won't they kind of thing still about, like, if you guys break up for a week, like, then that year has to start all over again. Clark is to go on and tell Jordan, hey, if you feel this way in a year, then you and me will have a different conversation. Because Clark is to say that when Clark told Lois is when he married her. And then he told her. Then he told her he had powers. I'm like, wait a minute. How is it that Clark wasn't to tell his kids right away, hey kids, yeah, I'm Superman, but Lois, like, he told her when, like, he married her. I guess that's a marinating enough time, I guess. I don't know. So We have Clark who's telling Jordan that possibly in another year from now, maybe both of them could sit down and have a completely different conversation. And then maybe we'll have at some point where Jordan is to have to forcibly tell Sarah anyways that he has powers, and this point of this conversation will be pointless. Because I'm assuming at some point Sarah is going to have to know. Sarah is probably going to accidentally find out. Probably the whole Cushing family is probably going to find out, or probably everybody in Smallville is going to find out that Clark Kent is Superman, and they'll probably keep it all a secret, because I'm assuming that's probably bound to happen at this point for this show. So, and we also have Bizarro, who speaks alien language throughout this whole time, so I'm assuming that Bizarro just speaks Kryptonian, and maybe the symbols upon his face are Kryptonian symbols. I'd like to think so. So, maybe I'm wrong. So, because technically I think Bizarro did speak to Superman, and so I think he spoke to him in Kryptonian. So we're going to have to, like, subtitle this guy out for, like, Superman to know exactly what this guy is saying. So, let's go further into this. So, and maybe Bizarro will get to learn English when he goes to the fortress. I'm assessing or assuming or whichever. Anyways, pushing on. So, but wasn't the forest like wasn't Bizarro unable, or wasn't Clark unable to use the Fortress of Solitude? So what is it, like Bizarro is just gonna like energize that thing back up to where they can use the fortress again? Anyways, that's just me. So we go on and we have Clark who's telling Jordan that, hey, but I'm going to go and help you out and give you a thing that is to show Sarah how much you care. So Jordan goes off and he is to be tempted to give Sarah something, a little something, something. And all of a sudden Jordan is still harping about his issue. And so Jordan has decided to go at this alone, which is to have Jonathan go off and do his thing alone, which I think was a massive mistake. Because we're just going to have just Jonathan just being steroided up to just go and take down Timmy, so that way they can be at an even keel of things. So we go on and have Jordan meet with Sarah, and so Jordan is to win Sarah over, which still bugs the out of me. Why is he winning her over? I don't get this. You know what Sarah should have done? She should have brought Jordan a telescope, and like we could re-reference Smallville all over again with the whole like Clark having his telescope. Wouldn't it be nice? What does he need a telescope for? I don't know, but it's the whole symbol of it all. Really just having so many feels of Smallville being put into this show. So we go on and we have Jordan, who gives, of course, Sarah here a necklace. A necklace that has some value from his grandparents, because I guess this necklace was to mean that Sarah is going to be Jordan's forever. I don't think that's going to happen. For the life of me, I think something's going to go wrong with Sarah, and all of a sudden this necklace is just going to become moot, or they're going to break up, and every single time Sarah is just going to give back this necklace to Jordan. Like, I guess it wasn't forever, Jordan. I guess it wasn't forever. So I'm thinking that something's going to happen, and it's going to tie into this necklace. Wouldn't it be interesting if we find out that necklace has a tracker inside of it? And Clark was to go on and say, well, yeah, like, since you were in love with this woman, I decided, like, a long time ago to have necklaces and stuff like that with trackers in it. And because I'm assuming at some point Clark was to go on and put trackers in a number of things. And wouldn't that be funny if we were to figure out, like, hey, yeah, you know that one watch that you've been wearing this whole entire season, Jordan? Yeah, tracker. Wouldn't that be fun? I would love that, how we have, like, Superman, who is this, like, paranoid freak of a man, who all of a sudden is to kind of go on and tell his whole family, yeah, I put trackers all over your, like, and wouldn't that just be, like, so... You would expect that from Batman, but you wouldn't expect that from Superman. But, like, what if they'd gone on and did that, where it's like, yeah, that necklace... tracker. That would be like such a dope idea. That would be pretty awesome. It would be like an underhanded thing, but I'm assuming that like that's going to happen. So yeah, I'm thinking something's gonna happen with Sarah here, and all of a sudden we're gonna find out something about that necklace that we didn't know before. So with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. Hopefully I covered everything, because at the end of the day, I think anything that I'm going to say here is to go over the time of which that is allotted me via the length of this episode. So how are you feeling about Superman and Lois? Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there's a billion things that I forgot about, or there was something that I was wrong about from the previous episode, because I'm sure that's what happened there. At least I had gone on to lesser and lesser paraphrase or get certain things that feel way off base. So luckily I've kind of honed in and tried to do these season reviews a lot better. I think a lot of times I would go on and I would watch this show and watch it with a number of things, and then come on here and just review every single thing in one fell swoop of a shot, and that was always a mistake, and I realize that now. But this time around, I'm trying to review these differently. I'm hoping that people like them more, or I'm hoping... Don't hit the like button. I'm just saying, like, I hope people will enjoy them more, or people are like, oh yeah, I know this show too, from backwards and forwards. Like, yeah, like, how unpredictable is this? Or maybe people will have hugely conflicting things, because I'm sure that always happens too, where it's like, hey, you're being way too harsh on this show. This show is a great show, and like, there's a lot of times where a lot of people would go on and say like a worst possible thing is actually the best possible thing, because that's what always happens. There's hugely conflicting feelings upon shows, and so with that said, because every time I go on and do a review, I'm like, yeah, I feel so good about this movie, and there's immediately that one person that's like, yeah, this is the worst movie I've ever seen, blah, 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 blah. Everybody has a right to that opinion, and I'm not going on and pointing out any one person and saying, like, oh, like, in their opinion, like, oh, heaven forbid they have an opposite opinion. I don't care. I'm just hoping that eventually, at some point, people are like, yeah, I feel the same way, or I can feel the opposite, but I'm not going to go out of my way to like, oh, I disagree, blah, blah, blah. I have to contradict everything that you're saying, and saying that is a mistake that you are to say this way. Because those people, I will just be like, well, thanks for the comment. Thanks for the comment, thanks for the view, appreciate it, and go on and review these yourself and have an opinion about this show, where I would go on and watch your review and go on and like, yeah, that's all wrong. Just like what I do is probably all wrong, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, see you next week for this review of Superman and Lois. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.